Hello everyone, this is Moehawkman and welcome to my first 30 hours episode, which is all about killing Kree'Arra, one of the first God Wars dungeon bosses. For starters, my average GP per hour was about 7.2 mil. This number comes from picking up as many of the drops as possible, including the garbage loot. With a GP per hour test on this large of a scale, even the bad items you would normally leave on the floor, like the steel arrows, the bolts, and the feathers, start to matter in the final price check. Now I must say that this boss is entirely AFKable with a proper setup. For me, I just used my full Pernix set with Ascension crossbows and Ascension bolts. I did try using different bolts on several trips, but it made no real difference on the killing speed in the long run. If you don't have Ascension crossbows, you can just use any tier 80 range weapon, but expect slower kill times and lower GP per hour. For my action bar, I used Death Swiftness, Unload, Dead Shot, Needle Strike, Snapshot, Corruption Shot, Fragmentation Shot, Normal Ricochet, Sacrifice, Binding Shot, and Piercing Shot. All of my abilities are normal versions because I'm too poor to get the upgrades. For my prayers, I used Soul Split and Anguish, and I also had my Penance Aura active to regain prayer points. Now, if you don't have these, you won't be able to AFK properly, but that doesn't mean that you cannot kill Kree'Arra. You'll just have to pay attention, and you'll also have to eat food relatively often. As for my relics, I used Berserker's Rage, Fury of the Small, and Persistent Rage. In my inventory, I brought 2 Elder Overload salves, a stack of notepaper, my herb bag, and a spring cleaner. I also brought my mechanized siphon to get some invention experience. If you don't have augmented gear, it's fine either way. You don't need it for this boss anyway. It just makes killing the boss a bit faster if you have the right perks on. Lastly, I used my legendary pet to pick up any drops I might have missed to help with the AFKing. Now onto the boss slaying. After grinding out this boss for 30 hours, I can safely say that Kree'Arra is still a very profitable boss even though the GP per hour has fallen off over the years, due to price changes and new bosses being added into the game. The armor set is still worth a decent amount because of invention. Besides the armadillo hilt, the chestplate and the chain skirt are worth the most since those are the only pieces that can be augmented and disassembled for extra parts. The rest of the armor pieces are only worth about half as much, but getting enough of them adds up over time. Now, after living in this boss room for 30 hours, I can tell you from experience that the rare drops are somewhat inconsistent. I went dry on rare drops for about 1/3 of the trips, which is pretty bad in my opinion. Normally, all of the God Wars bosses gives you 1 drop per trip when you get over 50 kills per hour, but sometimes RNG has other plans like it did for me. On the flip side, there were multiple trips where I got more than 1 rare drop to compensate for all the dry hours, so it balanced out in the end. The only thing that sucked about my drops is that I didn't get more of the expensive pieces like the chest plates and the chain skirts. I ended up getting more helmets, gloves, and bucklers than I would have liked, but that's just how the game works sometimes. However, I was surprised at how many random drops I was getting, like the dwarfweed seeds, grimy quarms, and super ranging and super defense potions. On average, I was getting 12 seeds, 10 quarms, and 3 potion drops per trip. There were a few trips where I received more than double the normal numbers, but those were few and far between and didn't really change the GP per hour that much. Something else that surprised me though was how much gold I was getting per trip. Even after paying the fee to start another hour, I was still leaving with over 500k gold nearly every single trip. Now there was the occasional trip that I got less, but the lowest amount I ever received during any of them was around 450k gold. But on the flip side, there were a few trips where I got over 600k gold, so those counterbalance each other. There was something else that I didn't anticipate, and that was how many clue drops I was getting. It was a combination of hards and elites with around a ratio of about 2 to 1. I ended up getting nearly 140 total clues, and it got to the point that I had to downgrade the hards to mediums just so I could keep stockpiling them due to the soft cap. By the end of the 30 hours, I ended up with 50 mediums, 39 hards, and 50 elites. If I had stayed there for a few more hours, I'd have a max stack of hards too. While on the same topic of clues, I noticed that my pet refused to pick them up, and I had no idea why. I don't know if I had the wrong option turned off, or if the legendary pet was changed to never pick up clues anymore, but it forced me to stop AFKing and grab them myself. Now I could have left them on the floor, but I do take clue breaks every now and then, and having a stockpile now would mean that I don't have to farm for them later and I can save some time there. Now I should mention that I did the full 30 hours in normal mode. I did try hard mode for a few kills to see if the drops are worth it, but I realized that the killing speed nearly tripled and the loot wasn't that much better even though the wiki said it was. If I could have gotten a kill timer to less than 1 minute, it might have been better in the long run, but not with my current gear or setup. Now before I move on to the final price check, I like to say that even though my gear wasn't the best, I was still getting around 53 kills per hour, and I ended up with 1,615 kills, which isn't the greatest by any standards, but this is pretty good considering I was AFKing the whole time. Let's move on to what you've all been waiting for, which is the price check. I'll start with all the random drops first, like the feathers, the crushed nest, the grimy quarms, the potions, the crystal keys, the dwarfweed seeds, the rune bolts, the dragonstone bolts, the rune arrows, the steel darts, and a cash stack of 15 million GP that I rounded off, totaling to just under 29 million GP. Now this just goes to show that even garbage random drops are worth something, even though it doesn't seem like it, which is why I decided to pick up as many as I could. As for all the rare drops, I got 20 God Sword shard pieces, 1 armadillo hilt, 5 helmets, 4 chest plates, 8 chain skirts, 6 gloves, 1 boot, and 5 bucklers, totaling just under 190 mil GP. I also got 5 random effigy drops, but who really cares about those things? In total, the entire price check is just under 218 million GP, and when you divide that over 30 hours, it comes out to 7.2 million GP per hour. Now there is a caveat to all of this, and that is luck. If you don't count the God Sword shards, I ended up getting exactly 30 armadillo pieces, which averages to 1 drop per hour even though I didn't get 1 drop per trip when I originally did this 30 hours test. It just happened to even out in the end. If you're luckier than me, you can make more if you get more of the expensive pieces, or you could have really bad luck and get absolutely nothing after a few trips. But please don't lose hope. If this test has taught me anything, it's that the game will try to even out your drops over time if you keep going back and not be discouraged from dry trips on bosses. Now if you do plan on doing this yourself, just keep an open mind. The game may screw you on drops early and give you a bunch of drops later like it did for me, or it could do the exact opposite and give you a bunch of drops early and no drops later. Just don't expect the game to give you chest plates and chain skirts every 3 kills because that's just not reliable. Anyways, that's all from me today. This has been your fellow RuneScaper, Moehawkman. Be kind to one another, stay safe, have a nice day. Peace out, everyone.